I was in the midst of a peaceful sleep when, suddenly, I was pulled from it by an inexplicable sensation. I woke up in the middle of the night, my chest tight, the air caught in my throat, and a feeling that something much larger was about to happen. I tried to calm myself, convincing myself that it was just a nightmare, but the clarity of the images and the intensity of what I had felt left a deep mark. In that dream, or vision, as I preferred to call it, I was in a devastated field, like a war scene, but not an ordinary war. There was something much darker and grander happening. Everything around me was destroyed, the ground was covered in ashes, twisted trees, and the sky was dark, tinged with red, as if the world were on the brink of apocalypse. The human figures I saw were fleeting shadows, people running in panic, as if fleeing from something they could not see. I was at the center of it all, and at the same time, I felt powerless. Suddenly, a powerful presence took over the scene, an intense light, so bright that my eyes burned, but I couldn't look away. It was at that moment that I saw him. The Archangel Michael. He was immense, his golden armor shining even in the darkness that dominated the battlefield. In his right hand, he held a flaming sword, a symbol of power and justice. His eyes were not only stern but also filled with ancient wisdom. When he began to speak, his voice echoed within me, as if it were being transmitted directly to my soul. "The spiritual war begins in 2024, he declared, with a solemnity that sent shivers down my spine. "Prepare yourself. There is no more time." These words were engraved in me, as if they had been scorched into my mind. I wanted to ask what it all meant, what my role in this war was, but before I could even form a question, everything faded away. The field, the destruction, Michael, all disappeared. I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat, my heart racing. But the scariest part was the persistent feeling that, even awake, I was still not alone. The room was immersed in silence, but the presence I had felt in the dream seemed to still be there, like an invisible shadow. I sat up in bed, panting, trying to process everything. Could it just be a nightmare? But if it was, why did it feel so real? The presence of the Archangel Michael, the clarity of the words, the urgency of the message. None of that seemed to be a product of my imagination. I looked around the room, and the darkness felt heavier than usual. I wondered, why me? Why was this message revealed to me? Am I being called to something greater than I can comprehend? At that moment, not quite knowing what to think, I felt something strange happening around me. Little did I know that this night was just the beginning of something much larger, something that would change my life and, perhaps, the fate of the world forever. I was enveloped in a deep sleep, almost as if I were floating in a dense, silent fog. However, without warning, an overwhelming feeling of anguish pulled me from that state. I felt my chest tighten, as if an invisible weight were upon me, and my body became immobile, paralyzed. The air around me seemed thick, and when I opened my eyes, the darkness of the room felt strangely alive, vibrating with an energy I couldn't explain. Something was wrong, but it wasn't just a common feeling of fear. It was different, more intense. I closed my eyes again, trying to return to what I thought was just a nightmare. But instead of finding the relief of sleep, I was thrown directly back into that terrifying vision. I found myself in a vast destroyed field, the ground covered in a thick layer of ashes that rose with each step I took. The sky, tinged with a dark red, seemed like a warning of something imminent, a catastrophe about to unfold. Around me, I heard muffled screams, as if they were distant echoes of a desperate crowd fleeing from something invisible. The trees, once lush, were now charred, twisted into grotesque shapes, as if consumed by a force beyond human comprehension. I could feel the fear impregnated in the air. It was more than an ordinary dream, it was as if I were physically present in that desolate place. Every detail was so vivid, so real. Then I saw him. In the distance, an imposing figure stood out against the dark horizon, slowly advancing toward me. As it drew closer, I realized it was not an ordinary human being. He was majestic, enveloped in a light that contrasted with the darkness around him. His golden armor seemed to radiate a celestial energy, and in his right hand, he held a flaming sword, its flames dancing as if alive. It was the Archangel Michael. His gaze met mine, and at that moment, I knew he saw me, not as a mere observer, but as someone with a role to play. His grand, radiant wings extended behind him, as if embracing the sky, imposing an absolute presence of power. He didn't need to say anything at first. Just his presence conveyed a clear message: something much larger was about to come. When he finally spoke, his voice did not come just to my ears. It echoed within me, in every fiber of my being. "The spiritual war begins in 2024, he declared with a tone of urgency that left no room for doubt. "Prepare yourself. There is no more time." I felt a shiver run down my spine. Those words resonated like a sentence, something inevitable, unrelenting. I wanted to ask questions, plead for more explanations. What war was this? What was happening? How was I involved? But my voice wouldn't come out. It was as if my body was trapped, unable to react. Before I could try to process what he had said, everything around me began to disappear, like smoke dissipating in the wind. The field, the devastation, the Archangel Michael himself, all vanished in seconds. And I woke up. Sitting on my bed, my chest heaving, covered in cold sweat. I looked around, trying to situate myself in my room, but the darkness felt different, denser. It was as if something from the vision had stayed with me. The feeling that I was not alone was inescapable. No matter how much I knew I was in my room, safe, there was an invisible presence, an energy that wouldn't leave me. The silence around me was deafening, heavy, and every shadow seemed to move, as if it were alive. I tried to calm my racing heart, repeating to myself that it had just been a dream. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The clarity, the intensity of the vision, the words of the Archangel, none of it was normal. Questions began to flood my mind. Why me? Why was this message sent to me? What was I supposed to do with this information? It was hard to accept that I was involved in something so grand, something that transcended the physical world. But one thing was certain, that night was a turning point. I knew, in some way, that my life would never be the same again. And so, with my heart still racing and my mind full of doubts, I began to realize that this would not be the last time I would encounter something so magnificent. The spiritual war of 2024 was just beginning, and somehow, I was at the center of it all. In the days that followed that vision, I tried in every way to push what had happened out of my mind. I returned to my daily routine, focusing on work, responsibilities, and normal life. But the feeling that something was profoundly wrong continued to haunt me, like a shadow I couldn't escape. It was impossible to forget the gaze of the Archangel Michael, the urgency in his voice. The spiritual war would begin in 2024, and I was at the center of it all. But what did that mean? On a typical Tuesday morning, while having my coffee, my mind wandered back to the vision, and the questions began to hammer again. Why me? What could I do? I was just an ordinary person, with no special skills, no deep knowledge of spirituality. Was I deluding myself, imagining things? But at the same time, the intensity of that experience was undeniable. It wasn't just a dream. That's when my phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. When I opened it, my heart leaped in my chest. The message was strange, almost enigmatic. The signs are around you. Have you noticed? The time is near. Prepare yourself. I looked at the phone in shock, my whole body freezing. Who could be sending me this? Could it be some kind of joke? I tried calling the number back, but there was no answer. What was happening? As I struggled to process what that meant, a deafening boom shook the walls of my house. I ran to the window, and outside, I saw a terrifying sight. The sky, which had been clear until then, was beginning to darken, as if a massive black cloud were spreading rapidly. But it wasn't an ordinary storm. That darkness seemed to pulse, alive, with an oppressive energy. In the distance, I heard sirens and the desperate barking of dogs, as if sensing an imminent threat. I immediately remembered the vision of the destroyed field, the red sky, and the words of the Archangel Michael. Was this the beginning? My heart raced, and the questions wouldn't let me rest. Was I seeing the first signs of the spiritual war? Was there something larger unfolding before me, something that transcended the physical, something that others couldn't perceive? I decided I needed to seek answers. I could no longer ignore what was happening. Those messages, the visions, the signs in the sky, everything seemed connected. And even without fully understanding, I felt it was my duty to uncover what was behind all of this. I grabbed my coat and left the house, driven by an urgency I couldn't explain. As I walked through the streets, I noticed that other people seemed completely oblivious to what was happening. For them, the cloudy sky was just a change in the weather, and the sirens were merely background noise. But for me, there was something much larger at play. Each step I took seemed to bring me closer to something invisible, yet tangible, as if I were being guided by a force I couldn't comprehend. Suddenly, I remembered an ancient church in the city center, a place that, for some reason, now seemed important. I wasn't religious, at least not until that moment, but something told me I should go there. Would I find the answers I sought there? Would this be the next step in understanding what Michael wanted me to see? The ancient church, the growing darkness in the sky, and the enigmatic messages, everything seemed to push me towards something inevitable. Little did I know that the encounter waiting for me inside would change my life forever and reveal the true role I would have in the spiritual war of 2024. I arrived at the ancient church, a building made of gray stones that seemed to have withstood the test of time but carried with it the history of centuries. The Gothic architecture, with its tall towers and stained glass windows, gave the place a mystical atmosphere. I had never been there before, but now, it felt as if something or someone was drawing me to that place. The sky continued to be shrouded in the strange darkness I had seen approaching, and a chilling cold coursed through my body as I climbed the stone steps to the entrance. When I opened the heavy wooden door, the creak echoed throughout the empty hall. Inside, the atmosphere was enveloped in a reverent silence, almost sacred. There was no one in the pews or near the altar, just the diffused light from the lit candles flickering gently. I took a few hesitant steps inside, trying to calm my mind. Why was I here? I wasn't sure what to expect. That's when I heard the sound of soft footsteps echoing through the hall. I looked around, trying to locate the source, and then, from the back of the church, I saw a man approaching. He wore a black tunic, which initially made me think he was the priest, but as he got closer, I realized there was something deeper about his presence. His eyes shone with an intensity that wasn't of this world, and his demeanor was calm, but it carried the weight of ancient knowledge. I was waiting for you, he said, with a firm yet gentle voice, as if he knew exactly who I was and why I was there. My mind filled with questions. How did he know who I was? And what did waiting for you mean? You don't understand yet, but you have already been chosen, he continued, as if reading my thoughts. The vision you received was not a coincidence. Archangel Michael revealed the truth because you have a fundamental role in this war. The signs you are seeing are just the beginning. My heart raced. I knew something greater was happening, but hearing it from someone else, someone who seemed to know all the details, was overwhelming. War? I asked, my voice trembling. What war is this? And why me? I'm just an ordinary person. I have nothing special about me. He smiled, a smile that was almost sad, as if he had heard that question countless times before. There is no one ordinary in this battle. Everyone has a role, and yours will be revealed in due time. But for that, you need to be prepared. Michael didn't show you everything, only enough to awaken your awareness. Now you must choose, accept what is to come or turn your back on your destiny. Those words echoed within me. A choice. Could I really turn my back on all of this and pretend nothing had happened? Doubt consumed me. At the same time, I felt something deep within me already knew the answer, even if I didn't want to admit it. I don't know what to do, I confessed, trying to understand the weight of the situation. The man nodded, as if he understood my hesitations. He extended his hand, revealing a small amulet shaped like a cross, simple and rustic, made of dark metal. This is the sign. Keep it with you. It will protect you when darkness tries to draw near. And it will try. This is only the beginning. Many forces will attempt to divert you from your path, but you must stand firm. When the time comes, Archangel Michael will communicate with you again. Until then, stay alert to the signs. I looked at the amulet in his hand, hesitant. The cross seemed to pulse, almost vibrate, with an energy I couldn't explain. When I took it, I felt a wave of warmth sweep through my body, as if I had been connected to something much greater than myself. Could this be the first step in my mission? The man looked at me one last time before turning and disappearing into the shadows of the church, leaving me alone with my doubts and that small object of faith in my hands. But inside me, something had changed. The feeling of helplessness was beginning to give way to a spark of determination. I left the church with the amulet in hand, the weight of responsibility now more tangible. But what I still didn't know was that this choice would set me on a path of confrontations that would surpass my understanding. And the darkness that lingered around me was only waiting for the right moment to fully reveal itself. I walked out of the church, feeling the amulet tightly grasped in my hands. The air felt heavier, as if the very environment around me was changing. The darkness in the sky, which had previously seemed a distant anomaly, now loomed over me, threatening. I began to wonder, had the choice I made truly put me in danger? Each step I took seemed to distance me from the life I knew and draw me closer to something darker. As I moved away, I noticed something strange. The street, once bustling, was now deserted. There were no people, no cars, just silence, occasionally broken by the sound of the wind blowing between the buildings. A chill ran down my spine, and the feeling of being watched intensified. I looked around, trying to discover the source of this discomfort. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a hooded figure watching me from the corner. It was tall, with an indistinct appearance, shrouded in shadows that seemed to merge with the darkness of the sky. Instinctively, I gripped the amulet, hoping it would fulfill its promise of protection. Was this the darkness the man in the church mentioned? Panic began to overtake me, but before I could think of running, the figure approached with slow, deliberate steps. When the figure finally emerged from the shadows, its face was still obscured beneath the hood. It stopped a few meters from me, and the atmosphere around seemed to freeze. That's when I heard a deep, disturbing voice echoing in my mind, not through my ears. They think they can protect you. But you are just another, weak and insignificant, the voice said, as if mocking my presence there. My body froze. I didn't know what to say or what to do. Was this really happening? I looked around, searching for an escape, but it was as if time had stopped. The streetlights flickered faintly, as if being suffocated by an invisible force. What do you want from me? I finally asked, gathering strength to speak. The figure took a step forward, and I felt the pressure in the air increase. The amulet in my hand began to heat up, a latent energy within it activating. You are on the wrong path, the voice continued. You have no idea who we are, what is at stake. This is your only warning. Give up now, before it is too late. My mind was confused. I had barely begun this journey, and I was already face to face with an entity that seemed to emanate from darkness. The words of the man in the church echoed in my head, forces will attempt to divert you. But what was this force? And why me, among so many others? Suddenly, the figure took another step forward, and at that moment, I felt the warmth of the amulet grow. A soft light began to radiate from within it, enveloped by a sense of security that overwhelmed me. I didn't know where this strength came from, but something inside me told me not to give in. I won't give up, I declared, feeling an unknown courage rising within me. As soon as I spoke those words, the figure recoiled slightly, as if my decision had somehow weakened its presence. The amulet emitted a flash of light, and suddenly, the hooded being vanished, dissolving into the darkness like a shadow that had never existed. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. The street returned to normal, the city's bustle resumed, and I was back in the ordinary world, as if nothing had happened. But I knew the truth. Something had tried to stop me, and this was only the first attempt. As night fell completely, questions piled up in my mind. If this was just the beginning, what else was to come? And who were they? I knew I had to go back to the church, find the man again, and discover more about this invisible war. Time was running out, and the feeling that something much greater was about to happen continued to haunt me. On my way back to the church, my mind was buzzing with questions. Who was that figure? What did this spiritual war mean? And why was I involved? With every step I took, I felt myself getting closer to answers while simultaneously diving deeper into a mystery. I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to unfold. As I crossed the church doors, the atmosphere inside felt different. The air was thicker, as if the very place was preparing for something. The man who had given me the amulet was there, this time kneeling, praying intensely before the altar. His lips moved in murmurs I couldn't understand, but his posture indicated urgency. "You've returned," he said without even lifting his head. "I was attacked," I replied, my voice trembling as I approached. There was a hooded figure watching me, and it spoke to me. It said I had no idea what was at stake. "What is happening?" He took a deep breath and stood up, finally meeting my gaze. There was a shadow of concern in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I warned you that forces would try to stop you. What you saw was only the beginning. They know you have something that could tip the scales of this war." A chill ran down my spine. What could I possibly have that was so important to this so-called spiritual war? Nothing in my life up until that moment indicated that I could be part of something so grand. But at the same time, the weight of the situation was undeniable. "What's at stake?" I asked, my voice firmer than I expected. "Who are they? And what do you mean by spiritual war?" He looked at me for a moment, as if weighing how much he could share. Then he began to explain, his voice grave and laden with seriousness. "This war is not just about what you see with human eyes. It is a battle that occurs in dimensions beyond your understanding. On one side are those who work for the light, guided by Archangel Michael and other celestial beings. On the other, the forces of darkness, who want to destroy the balance and lead humanity away from its divine purpose." As he spoke, a sense of discomfort grew inside me. I had always heard of spiritual wars in vague sermons, but now it felt much more real, more tangible. And the strangest part was that somehow, I had been dragged into this. But why me? I asked, confused. What do I have that's special? I'm just an ordinary person. He shook his head slowly, as if he had expected this question. It's not about being special or ordinary. Everyone has a role to play. But you carry something they fear. A connection, a sensitivity. Something that was awakened recently, perhaps without you even realizing it. And that's precisely why they will continue to try to stop you. My heart raced. A connection? That seemed too abstract, but at the same time, something within me knew he was right. Since that night, my life had changed, and not just because of the visible events. There was something larger at play, something I couldn't explain. So what do I do now? I asked, trying to absorb it all. He stepped closer and placed his hand on my shoulder, looking at me with an almost crushing seriousness. You carry on. You can't turn back now. Archangel Michael has already sent you signs. The amulet is just the beginning. From now on, the trials will be tougher, but so will the revelations. You will need strength and faith, because what's to come will be greater than anything you have ever imagined. Those words echoed within me, making it clear that my life would never be the same. I was about to face something much larger than any physical battle. But how far would this journey take me? I still didn't know, but I felt that the next step would be crucial. The night dragged on amid conflicting thoughts. The words of the man in the church echoed in my mind. You can't turn back now. It was as if he knew that, deep down, I was still struggling with the idea of being at the center of an invisible war. Even after everything I had witnessed, something inside me wanted to flee, ignore the signs, and return to my ordinary life. But was that still possible? I woke up the next morning with a heavy body, as if sleep itself had been drained by the presence of that energy that now seemed to surround me. I looked at the amulet on the table beside my bed. What did it really mean? Was I willing to carry this burden, this responsibility they spoke of so much? As I prepared to leave, something unexpected happened. The sunlight streaming through the window touched the amulet, and an intense light shone, projecting onto the wall. I froze for a few seconds. In the reflected glow, I could see what appeared to be an image. It wasn't clear, but over time, my eyes began to decipher it. It was a winged figure, wielding a sword, surrounded by flames of light. The Archangel Michael. The image seemed alive, pulsating, and with it came a wave of warmth that filled the room. My heart raced. This couldn't be a coincidence. It couldn't be. I picked up the amulet, hesitantly. Upon touching it, I felt a vibration coursing through my hand, something I had never experienced before. An energy almost electric. I knew, at that moment, that there was no turning back. I was connected to something much larger than myself. But why? It was at that moment that everything became clear in my mind. This was not just a war out there, in spiritual dimensions. It was a battle within me. I needed to make a choice, accept the role that had been given to me or resist and live in the shadow of an existence that, deep down, would never be ordinary again. The forces moving around me knew this. They knew that my hesitation was their greatest advantage. But then, a new question arose, even more frightening: what if I chose wrong? As I pondered, my phone rang, pulling me out of my momentary trance. It was an unknown number, but something compelled me to answer. Hello? I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. You saw it, didn't you? Said a familiar voice on the other end. It was the man from the church. The image in the amulet. The Archangel Michael is with you. I felt a chill. How did he know? How do you know this? I asked, unable to hide my shock. He sighed, as if he had expected that question. Because I went through this. Many years ago, I was in your place. The Archangel showed me the way, just as he is showing you now. But I made my choice. Now, it's your turn. What should I do? I asked, feeling a mix of urgency and fear. You need to prepare, he said, his voice grave and somber. The darkness knows who you are, and they won't give up easily. From now on, every step you take will be a battle. And you won't be safe anymore. I hung up the phone with his words echoing in my mind. I wouldn't be safe anymore. The weight of those words was overwhelming, but there was something deeper behind them. Something was about to happen, and time was running out. I needed to prepare, but for what? And how could I protect myself from something I couldn't even see? The man's words still echoed in my head. You won't be safe anymore. The fear was immediate, but I couldn't let it paralyze me. The phone still trembled in my hand, and the weight of that warning made me realize I was diving headfirst into a reality from which there would be no escape. I needed to prepare. But how could I fight against something I couldn't see? I left my house, walking quickly, feeling a sense of urgency that wasn't mine alone. I felt like I was being watched. It was as if shadows lurked around every move I made, but there was nothing visible around me, only that suffocating feeling of being under surveillance. I wondered if this was what the man had experienced too, before making his choice. As I walked through the busy streets, my thoughts were in turmoil. Who were these dark forces he mentioned? And why now? I knew that by touching the amulet, I had accepted something, even if involuntarily. But what I didn't know was the extent of the responsibility that came with it. The Archangel Michael had shown me a fragment of what was to come, but it was only the beginning. Suddenly, a hooded figure appeared in my path, blocking my way. The city continued to move, cars passed by, and people chatted, but time around us seemed to slow down. Our eyes met, and at that moment, I felt a wave of negative energy invading me. Fear almost consumed me, but I managed to maintain my firm posture. You shouldn't have accepted the call, said the cold, low voice from under the hood, without moving its lips. My heart raced. How did it know? Who was this person? It couldn't be a coincidence. Something or someone had sent that being to me, and it was not for my good. Who are you? I asked, trying to remain calm, even though my voice trembled slightly. He took a step forward, the shadow of his hood concealing any human features. I am a messenger of the darkness, he replied, almost whispering. And you are on the wrong path. There is still time to turn back, if you know what's best for you. His words came out like poison, laced with a subtle threat. It was clear that this figure wanted to destabilize me, to frighten me, but something within me, perhaps driven by the amulet or by what I had witnessed, gave me the strength to confront him. The path has already been chosen, I replied, with a confidence that surprised even me. I will not turn back. For a brief moment, silence enveloped us. The hooded figure tilted his head slightly, as if pondering my response, and then, without warning, he retreated and vanished into the crowd, as if he had never been there. The relief I felt was instant but brief, for I knew this was not the end. Something within me had changed forever. It was clear that, from that moment on, the confrontation had truly begun. The first warning had been given, and the opposing forces would not hesitate to try to bring me down. But why me? That was the question that kept hammering in my mind. What was the reason behind this entire battle? What was it about me that made darkness and light such fierce adversaries? I needed answers, but I knew the journey would be arduous and, without a doubt, dangerous. As I returned home, the hooded figure still lingered in my thoughts. I knew he would come back, and probably not alone. But what terrified me most was the feeling that he knew something about me that I still did not comprehend. Something greater was at stake, and I needed to discover what it was before it was too late. Night had fallen, and darkness mingled with the doubts swirling in my mind. I closed the door behind me and leaned against the wood, feeling the weight of insecurity bear down on my shoulders. The confrontation with the hooded figure had not just been a warning, it was a clear demonstration that the forces of evil were drawing closer. But why me? What was about to be revealed? Sitting at the table, I picked up the amulet and examined it more closely. It was simple, yet it carried a power I still could not grasp. Miguel's words echoed in my mind like a mantra: the power of choice can be both your salvation and your ruin. And what if this choice involved more than I imagined? I remembered all the people who had recently entered my life, those who had approached with intentions that now seemed obscure. There was my friend Clara, who was always by my side, and the stranger I met at the cafe, who seemed to know more about me than I did. I needed to understand if there was a connection between them and this spiritual battle. I took my phone and sent a message to Clara, asking her to meet me. If there was anything to be revealed, I felt she could be a key to opening this door of mystery. While I waited for her response, my mind wandered through possibilities. Does she know more than she lets on? And what about the stranger from the cafe? Does he have a role in this game? About half an hour later, Clara arrived. Her face was one of concern, and this only heightened the unease I already felt. What happened? You seemed so distressed in your message, she said, closing the door behind her and sitting at the table. I explained everything that had occurred, from the encounter with Miguel to the mysterious messenger of darkness. Her eyes widened as I recounted the story, but there was a determination in her gaze that reassured me. There is something you need to know, Clara said, her voice low, as if fearing the walls had ears. There is an ancient legend in our family about amulets. They are known to protect those destined to fight against dark forces. The revelation hit me like a bucket of cold water. Clara continued, her tone now more serious. My grandfather always spoke of a calling that some receive, and those who accept it are on a path to confront darkness. I believe you are one of those people, and the amulet, it has belonged to my family for generations. I was stunned by the revelation. What did this mean for me? My destiny was more intertwined with hers than I could imagine. Looking into her eyes, I realized she was not just there to support me, she was part of this battle. Clara, you know this could be dangerous. What happened to me could very well happen to you. Fear consumed me. She smiled, but there was a firmness in her smile that surprised me. I cannot step away. If you are on this path, I am too. I want to fight by your side. The connection I felt with Clara in that moment was powerful. I sensed that darkness would not be the only thing to face, revelations were just beginning. The phone vibrated on the table, interrupting my thoughts. It was an unknown message, just a number I didn't recognize. A single phrase appeared on the screen, "Don't trust anyone." My heart raced. What did this mean? I was about to be pulled even deeper into this dark game, and I didn't know if I could trust even Clara. The lines between friend and foe were blurring, and the spiritual battle unfolding around me felt increasingly intense. The message, with its cold and threatening words, made my heart race. I looked at Clara, who had also noticed the disturbance on my face. The doubts that had begun to dissipate now accumulated like storm clouds. What did it mean? Was someone watching our every move, waiting for the right moment to strike? What are you thinking? Clara asked, leaning closer, her eyes locked on mine. I received an anonymous message. Don't trust anyone. It's as if someone is trying to warn us of something, or worse, threatening us, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, but uncertainty seeped into each word. Clara frowned, her gaze lost in thought. I knew this was a delicate situation, but the urgency to act outweighed the fear. Whatever was behind the message could not be ignored. We need to find out where that message came from. Maybe it's a sign that the dark forces are closer than we think. The determination in her voice was contagious. I nodded, and together we began to investigate. I grabbed my laptop, and with Clara by my side, we started to analyze the number. It was an unknown number, and my mind quickly associated it with the stranger I had met in the cafe. He seemed to know more than he let on. But how could I connect with him without alerting him? I decided to try a different approach. Clara, do you remember when we met that man in the cafe? He was paying close attention to us, almost as if he was watching us. Do you think he could be involved in this? It's possible, Clara replied, biting her lower lip in concentration. But we can't be hasty. We need to know more about him before we take any action. She was right. We needed a plan. I stood up from the table, determined. Let's go back to the cafe. If he's there, we'll try to strike up a conversation, but carefully. We need to act like everything is normal. Clara agreed, and within minutes we were on our way. The cafe had a familiar aroma of fresh coffee and pastries, but I couldn't focus on the delights around us. My focus was on finding the man who had crossed my path before. When we entered, I spotted the man sitting at a table in the corner, just like before. He looked at us, and a sense of déjà vu washed over me. With every step we took, the tension mounted. That uncomfortable feeling of being watched hovered over us like a shadow. You talk to him, I suggested to Clara, my voice barely a whisper. It might be easier for you to approach. He might feel less threatened. Clara nodded and walked over to his table while I kept a safe distance, observing with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The conversation began casually, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something hidden in his words. I needed to know if he was friend or foe. The man smiled, and his words sounded friendly, but the glimmer in his eyes seemed to conceal something more. I glanced around, noticing other people in the cafe, each immersed in their own lives, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were part of something much larger, something sinister. After a few minutes of conversation, Clara returned to me, her expression a mix of relief and confusion. He said he was just interested in us as customers, she whispered. But there was something in his gaze. I feel like he knows more than he's saying. Before we could discuss further, Clara's phone buzzed. She quickly looked at the screen, and her expression changed drastically. It's a message, from the same number. You shouldn't have come here. I felt a chill run down my spine. What did that mean? We were in danger, and the spiritual battle that seemed to be unfolding around us was getting closer and closer. Time was running out, and soon we would have to decide whom to really trust. My heart pounded in my chest like a war drum. The message Clara received was a clear warning: someone was watching our steps, and the tension between us intensified. I looked at her, hoping her words could bring some clarity, but the fear in her eyes reflected my own state of mind. What are we going to do now? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Clara took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into unknown waters. We need to go home and investigate. We can't leave this as it is. Someone is warning us or threatening us, and we don't know why. I agreed, and we quickly left the cafe, the feeling of being watched amplifying the urgency of our steps. When we arrived home, each of us sat in a corner of the sofa, surrounded by the heavy silence that enveloped us. "We have to find out who is behind these messages," I declared, and Clara nodded, already opening the computer. "We need a plan." "Oh, ChatGPT dis. ChatGPT." We spent hours scouring the internet for clues, but the real revelation came when we found an obscure blog dedicated to accounts of spiritual experiences and supernatural manifestations. One of the articles caught our attention: The Spiritual War of 2024, The Rise of the Shadows. "Look at this," Clara said, pointing at the screen. "They talk about a battle between celestial and demonic forces that is about to take place. There are mentions of Archangel Michael and how he is preparing humans to unite against the approaching evil." A chill ran down my spine. Could this be what was happening to us? Could we be pawns in a much larger game? Questions echoed in my mind. What did all this mean for us? Do you think the messages we're receiving are related to this spiritual war? I asked, trying to articulate the thoughts swirling in my head. Clara paused, deep in thought. "It could be. If dark forces are really preparing for battle, we need to understand our role in this. We need to unite and protect ourselves." Deep down, a voice whispered that something was approaching, something beyond our understanding. It felt as if the pieces of a cosmic puzzle were aligning, preparing to reveal a truth we weren't ready to face. That's when we decided it was time to seek someone who could help us better understand this situation. I remembered a friend who had deep knowledge of spirituality, someone who could be crucial at this moment. "Clara, what if we call Anna? She's always had a strong connection to the spiritual. Maybe she can give us some clarity on what's happening," I suggested, and I saw a spark of hope in Clara's eyes. After a brief call, Anna arrived within minutes, her penetrating and serene gaze filling the room. As soon as she walked in, I could feel the energy shift. It was as if a light had been turned on in the middle of the darkness. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice soft and inviting. As we began to tell our story, I noticed she listened intently, but her face showed signs of concern. "What you're facing is serious," Anna finally said, breaking the silence. "The messages you're receiving are not mere coincidence. The spiritual war is intensifying, and Archangel Michael is indeed calling on those who are willing to fight by his side." The weight of her words hung in the air. A mix of relief and terror washed over me. We were in the midst of something we couldn't control, but somehow we were connected to it. "What should we do?" I asked, almost pleading for guidance. Anna took a deep breath, as if gathering all her strength. "The first thing we need to do is strengthen our spiritual protection. If there are indeed dark forces trying to reach us, we need to prepare ourselves." However, as Anna guided us on how to protect ourselves, a new message appeared on Clara's phone, this time more direct and threatening: "You cannot escape the fate that awaits you." The shadows seemed to draw closer, and the war we had feared was about to reveal itself in all its intensity. Time was running out, and the battle for our very existence had begun. The message that appeared on Clara's screen was like an echo of everything we were facing. The air grew thick, and a grave silence enveloped the room. We felt the pressure of something much greater approaching, and doubt began to turn into palpable fear. "What does this mean?" Clara murmured, her eyes wide as she stared at the screen. Anna leaned forward, her expression morphing into a mask of seriousness. "It means we are at a critical juncture. The dark forces are preparing to attack. We cannot hesitate," she said, the determination in her voice unmistakable. "Gathering forces." Thus, Anna began to guide us in a protection ritual. The atmosphere transformed, and a sense of anticipation hung in the air. Every step we took, every word we uttered, seemed to prepare the ground for the battle ahead. We joined our energies, forming a circle as Anna recited prayers and invocations to Archangel Michael. During the ritual, I closed my eyes and let my thoughts flow. I wondered if we were truly ready for what was to come. What would this spiritual war entail? Who is the enemy we were about to face? And, above all, what would our role be in this grand cosmic theater? A call from the Archangel. As Anna guided the protective words, an intense light began to shine amid the darkness surrounding us. I felt that we were not just three people in a room, we were representatives of something greater, part of a struggle that transcended time and space. And in that moment, a vision came to my mind. I saw Archangel Michael, imposing and radiant, wielding a sword of light against the shadows threatening the world. "The Archangel Michael is with us," I declared, my voice trembling with emotion. "He has summoned us to fight." Clara and Anna exchanged glances, and the flame of hope began to burn again. It was a sign that we were on the right path. The battle approaches. With the protection established, we felt stronger, more united. But the previous message still weighed on our minds. The destiny awaiting us was uncertain. We needed to act, and quickly. "What do we do now?" Clara asked, anxious for answers. "We need to investigate further. We can't let fear take over. If this war is approaching, we must discover who our allies are and who is against us," Anna replied, determination reflecting in her eyes, mirroring my own. In that moment, I decided I could no longer be a spectator in my life. It was time to act, to confront the shadows. The spiritual battle was not just a matter of survival, it was about our souls, our faith, and our connection to the divine. The final warning. Still immersed in this newfound determination, I heard a noise coming from the window. I glanced quickly and saw a dark figure retreating, as if it had been spying on us. A shiver ran down my spine, and my heart raced. "We're being watched," I whispered, but before I could say more, Anna grabbed my arm. "We can't let this scare us. We need to be proactive. If they're watching us, it's because we're doing something right." Courage surged within me. It was time to unite our strengths and face the unknown, no matter the cost. We knew the war was approaching, but now we were no longer alone. Archangel Michael was with us, and his light would guide us through the darkness. A new beginning. With the decision made, we committed to exploring the spiritual world and uniting with others who also sought the truth. We were ready to face whatever came our way. The spiritual war of 2024 would not just be a fight against the forces of darkness, it would be a journey of self-discovery and strengthening of our faith. The final message from Michael echoed in my mind: the light will always prevail over the darkness. Now, more than ever, we knew we had to fight, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who could be affected by the approaching shadows. And so, with renewed courage, we prepared for what was to come. The battle would not be easy, but we were ready to face our greatest fears and unite in a call to action. After all, this was not just about survival, but about preserving the light that dwells within each of us. The end of one chapter marked the beginning of another, and we were determined to write our own story in the spiritual war unfolding before us. The future was uncertain, but with Michael's protection, we knew we could face any challenge that lay ahead.